royal family?
Well, I think he's had one major concern throughout his brief period as Crown Prince. And you would think that as soon as he has been nominated Crown Prince, i.e. the future king, that's the question over. But his concern is there anyone to rival him within his more powerful cousins and uncles? And he's been concentrating on two lines. One is the sons of the so-called Suderi Seven. These are the sons of King Abdulaziz and Hussa Suderi. And the other line are the sons of the late King Abdullah. Now, Saad bin Turki, who's a professional soldier and who's commander basically of land forces, was in the crosshairs on both accounts. He's the last son of the Suderi Seven of any military significance. But his wife, Abir, is also a daughter of King Abdullah. And so we regularly get these purges, which are ostensibly about corruption, but really about clearing out any significant heavyweight amongst his family who could challenge him.
We also saw on Friday, as is written in the report there, that Sheikh Abdurrahman al-Sudais, the Imam of the Grand Mosque of Mecca, preached a sermon that many interpreted to be in favor of softening relations with the Israelis. And then on Sunday, King Salman came out and said that there would be no normalization. Do you think there's a rift somewhere there between the king right now and perhaps Prince Mohammed bin Salman, who may have instructed Sudais or encouraged that kind of a softening of relations?
Well, the mental capacity of the king, or rather his actual state of health, has always been under a cloud. He has been reported many times to have a form of dementia, and so his actual level of activity has always been questioned, or at least under a cloud. Whether this is himself, or whether this is a faction within the royal family saying, no, we cannot, we have to stick to the orthodoxy. No one can tell. What's absolutely clear is that the Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman, wants to normalize relations with Israel. He's met Netanyahu privately, I'm told, several times. What he wants to do is stage a public handshake in Washington. And he's not been allowed to do that. It's been too sensitive for him. A previous version was leaked. So what you've got is policy making that's on such a big subject of do you recognize Israel, or do you normalize relations with Israel without solving the Palestinian conflict and over the heads of the Palestinians. Crown Prince says, yes, let's go, let's do it. Let's say that, and he's constantly putting out feelers and constantly telling his subjects to say things. And that he was in charge of a social media campaign that said, yes, we've got to normalize relations, and he's undoubtedly behind the sermon. And then there's a pushback from other members of the family who simply say, no, this is a step too far. King Abdullah, our King Abdullah, created the Arab Peace Initiative in 2002. This was a signature achievement. He was then actually Crown Prince at the time. And what this does is drive a coach and horses straight through that, because the Arab Peace Initiative said we only solve this conflict when a Palestinian state has been set up. This is saying the exact opposite.
Now, excuse me, the resistance to these steps that have been taken by Mohammed bin Salman, has there been any? I mean, are people just allowing themselves to be arrested, fellow family members? Are they not, stirring up and beginning to come together and trying to prevent further arrests and possibly even the release of some of those who have been detained?
Well, the most that they can do is start social media campaigns, and two have been started already about some of the many people who have been detained. I think I've counted in all 5 major purges. There are literally hundreds of people But the short answer to your question is they can't do anything. This is a complete and total dictatorship. They've got no powers to do anything. It's been told to me that Saad bin Turki had been talking to other retired army officers about the situation. He is a humble person. He was respected. I think another reason why he fell out with Mohammed bin Salman was he was critical of the way the campaign in Yemen had been launched, and particularly critical of the fact that their allies, the Emiratis, had basically partitioned Yemen and seized whole swathes of it in Aden and the northern port of Hodeidah or around it. And he's very critical that A, the Houthis hadn't been dislodged from the capital of Sana'a, and B, that their allies had gobbled up half of it. Even the slightest hint of talks between him and former army generals would put him in suspicion. So there's very little anyone can do in this situation. Except wait for a knock on the door. And even if you're in a palace and you're surrounded by bodyguards, that doesn't protect you. There are many princes I know who are virtually under house arrest.
And what about general society? Are there any stirrings amongst the Saudi Arabian public, or are people also just being led to believe that everything is normal within their kingdom?
Well, bin Salman is popular, or was popular amongst the youth, and for showing the outward, even the most superficial signs of being a reformer. And he's sensitive about his popularity there. He under him, women could drive, go to baseball matches, cinemas were opening. But as we've also seen, he has imprisoned and even tortured women activists who were at the forefront of that campaign. So it's extremely superficial. In terms of political freedom, there absolutely is none. Mm. And the reckoning is that he may lose that support of the youth when the economy when austerity really starts to bite, which is now set on. He has an extremely lavish lifestyle, as do the remaining members of the royal family. And he's basically, through mismanagement, plunged what is inherently an extremely rich country into a period of austerity. And when they start to have to open their wallets up for him, I think opinion will change. It's extremely difficult to gauge public opinion because it is absolutely Saudi Arabia, unfortunately, is going through one of the worst periods of dictatorship and repression in modern times. And literally, anyone can just disappear off the streets forever for a critical tweet. That's how perilous their situation is. So you can imagine there are all sorts of mechanisms in public discourse for burying it under the table. And one of them is private weddings. People talk in private weddings, but they have to be absolutely certain that no one is listening to them. But as far as one can gauge, and outside the country, there are large levels of anger amongst some former very powerful people there.
And then we've seen also the arrest of a number of ulama and sheikhs. The latest being Dr. Abdullah al-Basfar, who is a reciter of the Quran. What message is the Crown Prince or the Saudi authorities or whoever it is trying to send out by arresting these religious leaders?
Yes, I mean, it's particularly important in his case. He had no known political affiliations. And indeed, go right back to the arrest of the Muslim scholars themselves. They were very, very careful in their criticism of or in their independence from the official line. And someone, Oda, for instance, was arrested simply for tweeting that there should be peace between Qatar and Saudi Arabia. And that was just at the start of the blockade. That's the offence that imprisoned him and on which he was later charged with terrorism. So in this particular case, anyone who's popular is suspect because these Muslim scholars had millions of Twitter followers. And you could be lifted for absolutely doing anything. Whether you say you're a dissident or not, anyone who doesn't toe the line or doesn't obey orders is liable to arrest.
And so I think the final question would then be, does Mohammed bin Salman, one of the richest and possibly one of the most powerful men on the face of the earth, does he sleep in peace, David Hearst?
Sorry, can you say that again? Does he?
Does he sleep in peace?
No. He has to surround himself with large numbers of bodyguards, and he's pacing up and down in the middle of the night writing decrees. My general point is that under him there can be no stability, and he will constantly have to resort to these measures because he will always suspect people around him of basically arranging a palace coup, as indeed he performed against his cousins.
Mr. David Hearst, the editor-in-chief at the Middle East Eye, thank you so much for joining us this morning on Salam Media.
My pleasure.
Osman's Taj Mahal Spice and Rice. For over 80 years, Osman's Taj Mahal have been perfecting the art of the perfect blend of spices, pure, aromatic, and well-seasoned. Spice